Hello, dear friends, dear guests. Welcome to the book launch and discussion of Unleashed Contemporary Art from Turkey. We're in fact not necessarily going to be discussing the book, but rather looking at Turkish contemporary art from three different perspectives. Unfortunately, Saruhan Doğan will not be with us. We have artist Erinç Seymen, contemporary art consultant Suzanne Egeran, and gallerist Kerimcan Guleryuz with us from Exist Gallery in Istanbul. The Turkish contemporary art seems to be gaining more coverage and visibility internationally. This can be due to many factors, political, social, cultural, and international factors, but we want to look in this debate specifically at the Turkish art scene and how it relates locally and how it relates to international actors. So I'd like to start with Kerimcan Guleryuz.
Thank you.
You were practically born into the Turkish art world, being who you are, your profession and your father being a major artist in Turkey. Can you set the stage for us for Turkish contemporary art?
Well, actually, I'd kind of more or less like to begin with, we can't hear. I think we need more audio, or is it just me? Oh, here we go. All right.
Yeah, better.
Actually, when we start to talk about Turkish contemporary art, we have to remember that we're being referred to as this kind of new emerging art scene. And this whole idea of emerging kind of makes it sound like everything is just now only beginning. And it's important to understand also when we talk about Turkey that really in essence we have to start with this whole clique of cliches and stereotypes. These cliches and stereotypes are a commonplace of act of orienting ourselves in our environment. We're all led down strange paths embellished with imagery. And the origins of these imaginable associations or imprints are often forgotten or unexamined. When we take an associative mental tour of a significant destination, such as a great city, we have recourse to landmarks. The Eiffel Tower, the Empire State Building, the London Bridge, or the Hagia Sophia. All of these act as cultural landmarks, which are the starting points for our projected journeys. In the case of Turkey, the images formed in the minds of those from other places are less distinct, less current, less accurate, and carry a weight of associations that have even less to do with the reality of the place than the caricatures and generalizations embodied in the examples I mentioned previously. I hope that today's discussion will help to show how varied and multifaceted actually the real landscape is, beyond the accretion of assumptions and preconceived notions that today serves as a basis for cultural dialogue. So that's kind of how I see this whole thing. We're really imposing a lot of just strange subjective opinions that we really don't know how they first started. But now through art, we're going to create these new introductions.
Do you think these cliches are formed by the international observer, or we have cliches about ourselves in Turkey?
I think it's twofold. I think that yes, there is a projected exoticism that sometimes comes up because, you know, like I said, when you start to talk about Turkey, a lot of people have a lot of ideas that are just front-loaded. I think sometimes if we're not careful, the Turkish community has a tendency to maybe play to those ideas as well. Sometimes cleverly, playfully, in which the works are, you know, teasing those Orientalist metaphors. Sometimes, unfortunately, falling victim to that idea. So I think it's two-part. Both there is an imposed viewpoint, and if it's taken care of well, then we get to play with it. If it's not, then we're victims of it.
I wanted to quickly ask you about the role of the biennials before I move on to Suzanne, because it looks to me that we've gained more prominence because of the Istanbul biennials internationally, and I wanted to get your viewpoint on that.
In the sense, I think, you know, obviously a biennale in any perspective, when you think about it, is a great opportunity for a city to showcase itself. Unfortunately, I think in the case of generally speaking, something like the Istanbul Biennale, which has a point of having to be international, I don't necessarily know if that really gives a proper showcase to Turkish artists per se. But obviously the influence of such an important main event really contributes to a lot of people getting more in touch with the environment. But yeah, obviously the weight of the Biennale cannot be, dismissed at all.
Moving on to Suzanne, you also have multiple personalities or identities. Let's say you're based in London, but you work closely with Turkey and you also have Turkish heritage. So you're both, I think, an objective observer. I don't want to say an outsider really, an observer, but at the same time inside the scene. So you can you put it also in context for us?
For me, can you hear me properly? Last fall, I did a project in Istanbul during the biennial called In the Between. And that project came out of many years of looking at the Turkish contemporary art community and watching it develop and grow, and believing that actually this was the right moment for me to come in and offer maybe an international perspective to the community. I was very curious to see how bringing a group of artists who are well known in other cultural capitals like New York or London, but who haven't been seen yet in Istanbul, how that would play itself out, how people would respond to them. And so I combined a group of international artists with some Turkish artists who people will know internationally and locally. And the response was overwhelmingly positive, which for me was very interesting. It indicated to me that, in fact, there is a dialogue which is loud and clear right now between international art and Turkish art. It's not that there's the Turkish art community separated from the international community. They're in dialogue, and for me that's a very important point.
And also, just before moving on to Erinç, I wanted to ask you about this dual nature of Turkish identity, East, West. Some people call it bridging, some people call it irreconcilable differences, and you have artists who are producing more local themed work, contemporary work still, and then artists who are producing more international, universal message. I mean, this is true for all cultures. This is not something unique to Turkey. How do you make the audience understand or find out about that context?
Well, I think most contemporary art requires a little bit of background knowledge. It's difficult to come to just about anything that's being made without some kind of context or understanding of the issues that are being addressed. So in that sense, it's not unusual. And I think that the same would be true if you looked at art from Brazil or really any country. I think what's more important is that people are engaging with a set of shared ideas, historical ideas and contemporary ideas. And those will shift slightly depending on the context, but ultimately it is, I would like to think, one conversation.
I want to come to you, Erinç, since you're actually at the core of the creation process. You're the one who's planting the seed, and I want to find out a little bit about your own journey, your own challenges. Sitting here today, it seems, very snug, very great place to be for a Turkish artist. But how did you come here?
Okay, I think I should first underline the fact that I don't identify myself as Turkish. I'm someone from Turkey.
Perfect.
And ethnically, I'm quite a cocktail. And also, I want to add something to what Kerimcan said. He was mentioning about the cliches about Turkey, and I think it's important to state that Turkey is not a homogeneous country. And one of the most famous cliches should be that Turkey is expected to build bridges between East and West. For those who are not aware of it, I think we must state that Turkey cannot manage to build bridges between its own East and West, because there's a civil war going on in Turkey since 28 years. and most of the so-called Turkish artists who became visible in Europe are Kurdish, and they're from the Kurdish part of the country. And as a, let's say, as an artist who was born in the western part of the country, I didn't have the same path to walk as a Kurdish artist. So first of all, I think that should be clarified, because the West Turkish artists are complaining about being put in an orientalistic position from the view of a point of view of a Western ideology or authority, but Turkey is also producing its self-orientalism. And let's say some Kurdish artists who are not being labeled as traitors are being converted into exotic objects, and they're being captured in this status of victims, and that's of course not fair.
So if do you believe art has to carry, has the obligation to carry a political message?
Yes, of course. I mean, at least for me, I consider my artistic production as a political maneuver. Perhaps it's not a direct political statement as in terms of being an activist, but of course it's a maneuver. And I think this may be the most significant quality of current contemporary art in Turkey. I think no one expected the artists in Turkey to get that politically engaged and that daring to, let's say, spot some socio-political traumas.
What kind of impact, I will let you speak in 1 second, what kind of impact does their political engagement have on the rest of society?
There's a big blockage we have to pass, which is being an art viewer is still being conceived as a habit of upper class. For instance, I may consider myself as an artist who is in touch with the working class, with some controversial movements, but still, when they meet me, and let's say, for instance, I'm collaborating with anti-militarists, most of them have no interest in art, and most of them are not aware how many artists from Turkey are giving directly and very courageous anti-militaristic messages in their works. And this is this is a complication created by this class division, let's say. So I think, first of all, in Turkey, the biggest problem we have to solve is that art doesn't belong to upper class.
Thank you so much. And Suzanne, I think you had a comment on...
Well, no, it was more of even a question, which
yes.
is, do you believe that those issues that you raise in your work, or issues that are specific to Turkey, belong only within one conversation, or,
no.
or is it international?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there are some certain culture-specific references. I think some works of mine cannot be read by a viewer who is totally alien to the
right.
political
Some
context.
yeah.
But then again, I'm trying to somehow not translate, but perhaps adapt the local situation and put it in the big picture.
Right. I wanted to get Kerimcan's view on, you know, Turkey is a multi-ethnic and even multi-religious society, and sometimes it's difficult to see all the different dynamics within the society. How relevant is this, do you think, to the current art market? And also want to get a little bit perspective on the collector. Yes, the collector is usually upper class, but the collector also has a keen interest in the artist and in the development of art as well. So it's kind of a, you know, there are many takes on the same issue.
Okay. First of all, yeah, when we're discussing this area we're calling Turkey, I think it's really important to initially remember that we're in essence talking about an area it's the residue of an empire. Turkey is this strange country that actually ended up getting the name Turk, which is supposed to be an ethnic identifier, but was meant to be this cohesive element. We're calling ourselves Turks. And actually, if you look at it in a historical sense, Turk was actually another word for Muslim. And so now in Turkey, we're dealing with many people of many ethnicity. And it's actually quite interesting when you look at the Turkish population from a genetic standpoint. Over 40% of the Turkish population is actually European genetically.
So how does that translate into the themes, the themes in Turkish art?
Well, you have to remember that what we're dealing with in Turkey is actually this, which has been going on for quite some time. I mean, we started discussing this, I would say, really honestly in the early 60s is when it first actually starts to come about. And we start to talk about, through art, these various different identities. And art being this fantastic vehicle for discussing and dissecting and examining this culture. Now what is making, I think, the Turkish argument more and more interesting for the world is the fact that I believe most Turkish artists are having to work through issues which are kind of on the cusp of redefining, in a way, possibly Islam, possibly doing a lot of work that's also gender politically referenced. I don't necessarily think if we fixate on some kind of ethnic identity, I really don't think that's neither long-lasting nor helpful. But I think it's the core essence of what makes this country unique is all the various different elements that it's contained in. But as far as your question, as far as collectors,
yeah.
If I could ask you to repeat the question.
Basically, how do you see the Turkish art scene becoming hopefully more institutional with different actors, whether it's galleries or collectors or educational institutions?
I don't know whether institutional is a good thing to go to, but...
I'm not saying governmental or bureaucratic,
yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
In a better organized sense, I think it's important that that collectors understand what their role is in the art environment. That they don't just refer or expect some kind of just plain monetary kind of give and take. That they understand that actually they have. I consider collecting the new kind of art form. It's a secondary art form. You actually start to collect works independently of each other, put them together to create this new context. Now, I think only recently are Turkish collectors starting to understand what exactly power they could have in that. And to both, maybe not be a patron necessarily one single individual, but to actually maybe support a school of thought or a methodology.
Suzanne, can you put us in perspective about international audience, international collectors also for Turkish art? Do you see increased interest, or is this kind of a hype we have in Turkey?
No, I think there is right now an extreme amount of interest in what is happening in Istanbul and Turkey in general. People are curious, recognizing Turkey as an emerging market, not just art market, but in general, in the kind of social and economic sense of that. And people are visiting the city more often, and as a result are paying closer attention to what's being produced culturally in the city right now. So I think several of the institutions and galleries that have opened over the last years in some way, and you can answer this maybe better than I can, are not just speaking to the local population, but also to the international visitors who are curious about what is being made in this environment. And And that new interest, I'm sure, has an impact on not only sales, but production, because as you pointed out, you're not just making work for an audience that will automatically understand what you are referring to, but trying to create something that will be understood more broadly. And I think that's important.
But that's the alienating quality I'm trying to put, because I also want to alienate the local viewer.
That would be good,
the local audience is not my friends. You know, I want to somehow terrorize the local audience as well, because otherwise it would be me just trying to be objective. And for instance, you were saying that perhaps Suzanne can be a bit more objective. I'm not trying to be objective. I'm trying to remain as subjective as much as possible, because I want to.
So you're basically trying to press as many buttons as you can at home.
I just want to resist on a certain position. And I also want to ask you something. Perhaps I'm disrupting, but
let's hear it.
Do you think that sudden interest in contemporary art in Turkey can be explained by a cultural interest, or does it also have something to do with the interest of the global capitalism? Because Istanbul is now being labeled as the next cool city. And,
right.
One of you take it, Suzanne.
Well, I think that it's all related in the sense that as the economy in Turkey has been really booming and expanding at such a rate, basically that's going to have an impact on the contemporary art buying community, in the sense that it's going to expand. As there's more buying power, there will be more engagement with contemporary art culture. So I read a very interesting figure a couple of years ago that was released by Art Tactic, which said that in Turkey, in the year 2000, $10 million worth of art was sold. And this is the official figure. It's probably much higher. But that figure then had increased to over 45 million by 2008. So that's, even if it's not entirely accurate, it gives you a sense of how much has changed in such an amazingly short period of time within Turkey. And I think that that's really significant because that means that there will be a response locally that people internationally will then respond to. I think it's all connected in a way.
I'm very sensitive to some of the discrimination issues that you mentioned, and also censorship. How about women and gender issues? Just, I can't let this be. I want to ask you about women artists in Turkey, not just you, or all of you, and female participation or women's issues as a theme.
Okay, I'm not a woman, but
I
can,
you're not,
as an openly queer artist, I may say somehow I share a lot of issues with female artists. Okay, I will try not to construct a binary model between West and East, but for instance, Michel Foucault was saying in the Western culture, especially in Catholic countries, sexuality is not something to hide, but something to confess. That's not the same case in the culture I was raised in. By us, I think I was pretty much coded of the acts or of the qualities I had, which I was very aware what I have to be ashamed of and what I shouldn't be ashamed of. So I think censorship pretty much operates as a mechanism of self-censorship. You always know your limits. Of course, you try to expand those limits, push them a bit harder, but you always know what is going to be condemned, what is going to be labeled as disgrace or immoral. So you always watch yourself. So you became a police officer of yourself. And I think many of us, many artists from Turkey, strive to kill the police officer in ourselves first.
I would like to say thank you to the panel and open it up for any questions that you might have. We have mics around the room, and we have about 5–10 minutes to entertain your questions. Any nominees? Please.
Hi. I have a question about the context. If you present Turkish artists to West European public, I've noticed that the edginess is not always being transmitted to the viewers because you need the surroundings. For example, I've seen the photos of Nazif in Art Dubai, and the context was there were Arab men in their white traditional dresses, and there it really hit me what Nazif was doing with his work. He's photographing just young girls. But in an art fair in Holland, his message doesn't come across. Is this a way of, do you know how to present Turkish artists in a way that the edginess is coming across in Catholic countries, for example?
Who wants to take this question? Kerimcan, perhaps? It has to do with Nazif Topçuoğlu's work and...
No, I understand, but are you questioning why a gallery is showing the work in that kind of context, or should there be a nationalistic methodology in presenting a Turkish argument? I didn't... Sorry.
Please clarify.
No, I'm trying to ask you, do you know how you can present it in the best way?
In the best way?
Yes, because you cannot move the context. You cannot move a country to another country.
Well, we actually, Suzanne and I were talking before the panel, we were actually talking more about whether it was actually a good idea to be constantly focusing on Turkish contemporary art instead of actually trying to define the region, or, you know, why is the Turkish ideology or that Turkishness important at all? Actually, I think it's important when you put it counterpoint to next door to Iran. And we're actually, in the art sense, dealing with the same issues, which are about the human condition. And it's about surviving or developing underneath those circumstances. And art acts as a vehicle to talk about those specific issues. Now, if we're going to talk about a specific Turkish issue, it's so multi-layered that I would be hard-pressed to sit there and say that there should be one methodology or way of going about it. It's the responsibility of every single gallery to really make the proper selection. And I agree that it might be hard to take a specific artist out of context and put them into a fair like Dubai. Actually, I was quite surprised on this amazing positive reaction that Nazif got in Dubai. Because you know, I don't think it was really what the local populace would have in mind. But I think, you know, just by its sheer presence in that it has a potential for being agitative, yet also specifically not Turkish in the least. I mean, his works are more in the line of Baltus, rather than something that would say cliché Turkish. So therefore, I can't really answer your question.
And by the way, he also...
Sorry. Please.
I want to remind you that he gave an interview very recently, and he stated that he cannot avoid having this Orientalistic perspective also towards his works. So I'm not sure whether he suffers so much of being exoticized by the Western audience. I think if he states, if he formulates that himself is an Orientalist.
I think he allows that into his work.
Yeah, perhaps.
Other questions from our audience? Well, in that case, thank you all very much for all participating. And the book is here. I have to do my bit. Unleashed Contemporary Art from Turkey. And it's on sale in the bookstore across the hall. Thank you for coming.